Hi everyone, and welcome to yet another video on the Nikon D750. In this video we're going to look at a new feature on the Nikon D750 called highlight metering mode. I know we usually always have spot metering, partial, centre weighted average, matrix, and all those metering modes, but on the Nikon D750 we have one called highlight priority. Now we're going to talk about that, but I'm also going to talk about something I touched on in a previous video, which is about the camera really exposing quite hot, meaning like they have changed the way the camera works on the D750. It's a complete new metering system and stuff like that. So if we look at this shot here, all these are raw files, by the way, out of the camera, no editing. We're not showing you any special images. I'm just showing you some things that a few little things that I've found out and a few little tips and tricks along the way. So this first image, obviously there's the settings. I focused on the center focus point in the center of the flower, right in this yellow bit here, right here in that bit, right? So, and as you can see, if you look at the exposure, it's a backlit situation. This, by the way, was in, I don't know if it was in AV or manual, but it was in automatic metering mode. Everything was central on the meter. I think it was AV, to be fair. There was no exposure compensation on it, and it was in the matrix metering, that just a standard metering, not spot. And you can see what it's done here straight away. I mean, not many cameras would give you this exposure without overexposing a few stops at least. And this is what it gave me out of the camera. And if you look at some of these highlights here, now to be honest, that's the exposure that I'd be happy with, because I wanted the flower to be the correct exposure, not the background. But if I did want the background, I'd be screwed, because even on a raw file, if I move the highlights fully down and the whites fully down, you'll see, I mean, a lot of the detail has come back, but you can see up here and down here, it's absolutely gone. But to be fair, like I've just said, that'd be the exposure that I'd be happy with. Now let's jump on to the highlighted metering mode. So basically on the D750, which you won't have seen yet, but you will do shortly, there's a button at the front of the camera. It's on the opposite side on a diagonal from the lens release button that you use to take on and off, and it's the same sort of button. It's a spring-loaded button. So soon as I seen that this were taking place, I thought, right, I mean, usually I'd be in manual and I could just underexpose the shot, a couple of shots, stops, and do it like that, but I wanted a quicker way, and I set that button to be the highlighted metering mode, and this is what I got. Same shot, but obviously you can see the aperture. What I had to do, but it's adjusted the aperture to f10 to get, see, that's f2.8, the shutter speed and ISO is the same, but we've gone from f2.8 to f10. Now that's highlight metering mode. Now this is the way actually Nikon want you to shoot. This is what we were talking about when we were talking about the detail that you can pull back from the shadows. Now I'm not going to edit this image and show you how to recover the, I mean, a quick way just for a mess would be that. Okay, we'll just reset that. And that would bring you back some details, and this is the way Nikon recommend you go. But this is the highlight. So basically I squeezed the trigger, I squeezed the little button at the bottom, focused with my back button and took the picture, and this is out of the camera instead of that. That's the same thing, but that's matrix metering, and that's what I got there. Then if we go to the next picture, this is where I found out that when you use the highlight metering mode, that the camera really plays it safe. So if you're in AV or you're in manual, you can still overexpose. You either put exposure compensation on for a stop and a third over, or you just overexpose it in manual, a stop and a third, and then you get this. So that's out of the camera. Let me just delete this image for the purpose of the video. So that's the camera's matrix metering. This is highlight metering, with overexposed a stop and a third. And you can see that I've already got more detail in the flower now, but I've still retained detail in the highlights. It's not perfect, we've still got a bit of blowout, but I know damn well that when I move the highlights down, that now I've got perfect highlights. I'll just put the shadows up and we'll go even more, and now we've got perfect shadows. I'll just reset that. So that's the way I work with the highlight metering mode. I've figured it out already. When I use it, unless it's really 1 gazillion% important, I know that I can still overexpose my shot a stop and a third with highlight metering mode, and it just gives me that bit more detail in the shadows. I will go into this a little bit more later when I show you how to recover the shadows and stuff like that. So let's go again. Metering out of the camera, focused on the bedpost, and you can see it's still not many cameras would give you that exposure. You'd probably get that in matrix metering out of a lot of cameras, because they'd see the highlights, and so I mean, it is pitch black down this side of the bedpost. Even putting the shadows up, you can see they've come back of the shadows. A bit of noise there because we are at ISO 400, but if we go something like that and put a bit put blacks on and warm it up a touch, so we go. So we've kept the highlights, but anyway, I'll just reset that again. Straight out of the camera, can you see matrix metering centered on the meter? Look at these highlights gone at the back here. Look, you've no bringing them back. I mean, if I pull the highlights, yes, they've gone and the histogram's not clipping, but there's no detail in those highlights. They're absolutely gone. So remember that this is just matrix metering. Now I'm happy with that shot. I would have liked it maybe a touch brighter, but we do know that we can bring the shadows back if we need to be. Now this is metering mode. This is highlight metering, and I didn't overexpose it a stop either. This is just the cameras exposing for the highlights, then we'd have to bring the shadows back later on. I mean, you can see there is a fair bit of noise in there, but those shadows, I mean, that's way underexposed. Again, I just wanted to show you this because I was testing this out because there's a lot of white in the shot. I wanted to see if I'd get an exposure like this, but I didn't. You can see the camera is still, I thought with the new metering system, giving you more of a constant brighter exposure, that maybe we won't get 18% grey when we metered something white or black. And you can see we actually have, it's bang centre, which means it's metered for 18% grey. Again, this is white. Now this should have been the exposure we should have got, something like that. Back there, 3/4 of the way along the histogram, but we didn't, we got 18% grey. So that's not changed. Out of the camera, matrix metering. Matrix metering again. Can you see how it's blown that sky out? Pull the highlights back, we've not recovered it. But to me, that's the shot that I was after. I wanted some exposure on this flower. I didn't want that's the highlight metering mode. And you can see how, so if highlights are really important to you, you need to shoot this shot here, which is highlight metering mode, and then bring back the shadows later on. Again, when you go to the next image, you'll see that is where I chose highlight metering mode and said overexpose a stop and a third please, and I got that. And that shot now, I can pull the highlights down, pull the whites down, pull the shadows up, and I get the shot that I wanted, and I've got detail everywhere. But if you're not bothered about the highlights, which most of the times I'm not, this is what we get out of camera. I mean, you go try that with your camera in matrix metering or your Canon and photograph something like that with highlights like that, and that'll be absolute, that'll be like that. It'll be something like, well, it'll be like that one there, won't it? Again, matrix metering, you see the strong light coming in through the window. We've got a bit of blowout on the tiles here. Again though, to me, that's the exposure that I am happy with. In this shot, that is a brilliant exposure. It's better than coming out like that to save the highlights and then me having to put the shadows up and the exposure up later on. I like that exposure out of the camera, and to be fair, the highlights would they recover? Yeah, they've just recovered on that one. But again, if highlights are important, same again, just swapping focus point. Backlit situation, look how the don't forget these are out of the camera, by the way. I don't know what's that on there. What's that on there? Just checking that these are all, yeah, they're all out of camera. Again, look at that lovely exposure there, and it's a really backlit situation. The camera in matrix metering, don't care. Again, blown out these highlights at the back, look. But the camera, to me, that's a good exposure. It makes backlit situations more or less central on the meter. You have to mess around in manual, taking a shot, overexposing a stop, try it again, take another one, try it again. I mean, look at that. And the shadows had come, but let's put the shadows up. Look at all the detail in that bag. When we bring those shadows up. Again, matrix metering, highlight metering. The next one is highlight metering with a stop and a third over. Oh, right, okay, so what's I like? Matrix metering, lovely exposure is that, absolutely spot on. Even though we've got this highlight here, the camera doesn't care. It's given me a nice overall exposure. Focusing on these dinner plates in the rack, and you can see how the camera's not took this into consideration in matrix, and it's blown it out, but who cares, because to be fair, I was photographing, well, I wasn't photographing anything, it's just for the video, but I was photographing these plates here. Then this is highlight metering. You can see these shadows are gone now, but we can always bring them back later on, and we can bring up the exposure too. We'll bring up, sorry, that's the highlights, pull the highlights down, bring the exposure up as well, the stop, and you can see how we can bring the highlights and the, now don't get me wrong, if we zoom in there'll be a bit of noise there now, but that's how to do it, and I'll show you that in another video. But again, I said, right, okay, highlight metering, 1 1/3 of a stop over, and then yes, we've got some blowout on the highlights, but I know because it's only 1/3 of a stop, or a stop and a third, that look, I can bring it back, and I can always, using this technique, I can always retain my highlights and get more detail in those shadows, because if you look at the shadows in that one's a stop and a third, better detail in the shadows. To be fair, you could probably go 2 stops over what the camera said in highlight metering mode, because you can easily recover 2 stops of highlight loss in Lightroom, but a stop and a third's really safe. Now this is matrix metering. Look at that, coming in tighter, and it seems to have really blown out this window. Now if that were a bride's gown, you've lost all that detail. But if you're not bothered, like in this situation, I only really cared about the, well, I don't care about anything, but the pan, who cares about that? Underexposing again, backlit situation. You can see how well this camera in matrix metering is. I'm just going to fly through it now because it's getting, I've been through it, but again, it's the matrix metering's unreal. Look at that, matrix metering, not spot, matrix. Look at the window, that's the window, that window, by the way, that's focus. Look at it, it's just not bothered in any, but like I say, if we cared about the highlights, we'd be a bit screwed. In this situation, we could push them up, couldn't we? And a bit of contrast, bit of clarity, a bit of vibrance, and there you go. Anyway, again, matrix metering, highlight metering, the next one's highlight, matrix metering. See, this ain't done bad. Let me, if you look at this shot here, this is highlight metering, this one's matrix. Can you see how it's not got confused? It's just a nice exposure. Even this violent highlight over here hasn't thrown the meter off. I mean, yeah, it wants a bit of bloody contrast on it. It wants the highlights pulling down a bit of contrast, Won't bring the shadows up, put that down there. We even go more with them blacks. And there you go. The metering system on this camera is amazing. Matrix metering in the middle of the flower. Matrix metering. It just seems to get a really nice bright exposure, and it just don't care what goes on. Matrix metering. And again, I took this one, this is focused here on this little post here. and you can see that this big bright light at the side hasn't chucked off the meter in matrix. Anyway, I want to end this video now. So there's a lesson on highlight metering, and it's just something that, and how your camera, it could catch you out and you could overexpose a shot dead easy. And I mean, to be fair, when I had the Canon in matrix metering, or evaluative I think they call it, I never really had a shot that you couldn't really recover highlights back when you just used an overall exposure. On the Nikon, especially in challenging situations, it's dead easy to get an highlight that you can't recover in matrix metering, and that's why I've set that button for highlight metering, and I've already got in my head that I can still overexpose a stop and a third, even 2 stops. To be fair, I might even start over the next couple of days trying 2 stops, because Lightroom should easily bring those highlights. But I reckon some of these highlights here on here are probably further gone than, oh no, yeah they are. If you look here at the side of this rail right here, that's just gone. Not that really I might be bothered, but it's absolutely gone. There's no detail left there. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please comment and subscribe, and hopefully we'll have another video tomorrow on something different.